I'm Molly. I'm going to be talking about the respiratory system anatomy. The respiratory system functions are gas exchange, communication, olfactation, and pH regulation. Gas exchange is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and air. Communication facilitates speech and other vocalization, which allows for vocal communication. Smell is the ability to detect airborne chemicals or odors, and pH regulation is the control of carbon dioxide levels in the blood, which also allows for blood pH regulation. So the first structure that I'm going to talk about is the nose, and this will be the entry point of air into the respiratory system. The nostrils are the openings into the nose, and the facial portion of the nose is formed by the nasal bone and hyaline cartilage. The nose functions to warm, cleanse, humidify the air. It also detects odors and amplifies the voice. It also has protective properties. The nasal cavity is the internal chambers of the nose, and the space is divided by the nasal septum. The nasal cavity contains nasal conchae, which are tissues that fold containing blood vessels that warms incoming air, and mucus that moistens the air. Each nasal conchae are separated by a nasal meatus, which are passageways for air. The nasal cavity is lined with mucous membrane that contained pseudostratified columnar and epithelium cilia. So after the nasal cavity is the pharynx, which is kind of towards the back of your throat, and it functions in carrying air between the nasal cavity and the larynx. It has three portions. The nasopharynx is lined with ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium, and this is a passageway for air. The oropharynx is lined with stratified squamous epithelium, which allows it to act as a passageway for food and air. The stratified squamous epithelium is thicker and can handle abrasion. The laryngopharynx is lined with stratified squamous epithelium, and it is a passageway for air and food also. After the pharynx will be the larynx, which is also commonly known as the voice box. It functions in carrying air between the pharynx and the trachea while providing sound production and preventing food from entering the trachea. The airway surrounded by the larynx is referred to as the glottis, and the airway contains vestibular folds, which are muscles that protect the airway by preventing food from entering the trachea, and the vocal cords are muscles that produce sound, which allow us to speak. So the structure of the larynx contains several types of cartilage. The epiglottis is the uppermost portion and contains elastic cartilage. The structure also prevents food from entering the glottis by directing the movement of air into the glottis and ingested materials into the esophagus to be digested. The thyroid cartilage, or the Adam's apple, is the middle portion and looks like a shield. The structure contains hyaline cartilage and surrounds the vocal cords. The cricoid cartilage is lined with ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium cells. After the larynx will be the trachea. The trachea is a rigid tube supported by C-shaped rings of the hyaline cartilage and commonly referred to as the windpipe. You can see the C-shaped rings on the picture here, depicted by the different colors on the trachea. The C-shaped cartilage rings help to provide support to the trachea as a passageway for air to the lungs. The trachea is lined with ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium, and the trachea splits into two at the distal end to become the right and left main bronchi, which will split into the lungs because we have a left and a right lung, so the trachea will need to be able to split to bring air to both lungs. Next will be the bronchial tree. And the bronchial tree is a network of highly branched air tubes that carry air into and out of deep tissues of the lungs. The larger pathways are supported by the hyaline cartilage, and the smaller pathways are held open by smooth muscle. The bronchial tree is lined with ciliated, pseudostratified columnar epithelium, but become stratified cuboidal as the branches get smaller. The two main bronchi, a right and a left, that goes to each lung. These are the largest of the branches that carry air in and out of the lungs. And then within the lungs, the main bronchi split again and go into smaller, each lobe of the lung. This is referred to as the lobar bronchi. The right lung has 3 lobar bronchi, one for the superior, middle, and inferior lobes, and the left lung has 2 lobar bronchi, one for the superior and one for the inferior lobe. After the bronchial tree, so the bronchioles will be next, and the bronchioles are continuous of the segmental bronchi. At this point, they lose the supportive cartilage. They're much smaller. They transition from skeletal muscle to smooth muscle, pseudostratified epithelium to ciliated cuboidal cells, and branching off from the structure are the terminal bronchioles. These are the last branches of air ducts that act solely as an airway passage. We start to lose muscle here as well as cilia, just due to the really small size. The last structure that I'm going to talk about are the alveoli. These are a microscopic structure that are within the lungs. I didn't depict them in my drawing, so I do apologize for that. They are little grape-looking structures. We have millions of them within our lungs, so it would have been a lot to draw. But the alveoli are found on the bronchioles at the end of the alveolar ducts. They are microscopic air sacs that are the main site of gas exchange in the lungs. And like I said, the lungs contain millions of these alveoli. They are composed of 3 types of cells. The first type is the squamous alveolar cells, which form simple squamous epithelium and are crucial for gas exchange as it forms the respiratory membrane along with the endothelium and blood capillaries. The second type that I'm going to talk about are the great alveolar cells, which produce a fatty acid lipoprotein called surfactant. Surfactant prevents the alveoli from sticking to themselves and helps it to re-expand during inhalation. The alveolar macrophages are the third type, and they are often referred to as dust cells. They are white blood cells that help to clean dust and bacteria from the alveoli. And lastly, here's just an anatomy overview of all of the structures that we talked about. There are some structures that were not talked about in this video, like the lungs, the left and right lung. But yeah, here's my drawing. It's not the most detailed drawing of the respiratory system, but there's definitely more detailed drawings on Google. So thanks for tuning in. Bye.